Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Naftiko Capabilities podcast. My name is Ken Lane. I'm the Chief Community Officer for Naftiko, but you might also know me as the API Evangelist, where I've been talking about the technology, business, and politics of APIs since 2010. This is my podcast where I dive into different topics with different guests from across the space. Sometimes it's a single guest and a range of topics. Sometimes it's a single topic and an array of guests. This one, I'm sitting down with Anna Daugherty to talk about app security, governance, and other technical aspects of what we're building today. I know Anna from working at Stoplight. I've done a lot of work with her on spectral rules and governance and all that work that Stoplight brought to the API design first kind of life cycle. I interviewed Anna for my Breaking Changes podcast. I don't think it actually made it to production, unfortunately. It was part of a few that never quite saw it. So I was very happy to sit down with Anna. She's working for Arnica, helping lead AppSec product management over there. And I was really intrigued to learn her view of the space coming from Stoplight, but going to the AppSec space. But I started with the basics. I asked Anna, what is AppSec? Enlighten me.
So all that, like the shadow IT, the unsanctioned servers, all of that can be identified. That's part of the question, but it's more so if you're developing something that has secrets in it, right? Code that has secrets in it, or vulnerabilities, or you're using an open source repository or an open source piece of code that is vulnerable, right? Identifying all of those things before they get to production, because once they get to production, we found that 200 days is the average day length it takes to fix those problems.
Wow.
So our whole thing is like preventative. let's keep those things from being there. So it's very much about identifying those vulnerabilities at the sweet spot of when is a developer most likely to fix those problems. And some people believe that it's in the IDE. When it's like you're currently coding, you immediately get an alert when something might be a secret or a vulnerability, and you should fix that thing immediately. My philosophy is that's a little too early because they're working on solving a problem at that time. And the problem is not security. The problem is the thing that they're building. And so that's a little early. That becomes too much noise. It's like too interruptive. That's like breaking the flow, right? It's like, yeah, I can't focus on that thing right now. That's like you getting a Slack message at the time that you're trying to build something. It's like, I don't have time for that. Too late would be like if you're trying to set up a CI/CD pipeline to push to production and there's a gate, like a stoppage where security says, we identified these vulnerabilities. This thing isn't going to production until these things are fixed. And that becomes an immediately like slow down of everything. And then at that point, you're chasing the problem instead of preventing the problem. You're saying these 18 things, who introduced them? Where do they go? Who's going to fix them? Yeah. What's, it's triage at that point.
Yeah. And you're in their way.
You're in their way. And you can't go to production. That's really, really important to a developer to see it to the end. Our sweet spot that we found is what we call the pipeline-less approach. So don't need to set up a pipeline. Where are you in the production timeline? You're at the pull request or about to merge to pull request, and you get a scan that identifies these problems. Oh, I can fix those things before I go to code review. Because I'm going to have my code reviewed anyway. And that we think is the sweet spot because it's not too much noise, right? When you're trying to build the thing, it's not preventing you from going to production because you already have to have your code reviewed anyway.
Yeah.
And it identifies those things immediately in Slack or Microsoft Teams or PR, wherever you prefer to have those things identified for you. And we determine where you're most likely to fix the problem and when.
Yeah.
And we found that 72% of notifications that go to developers in Slack get fixed immediately.
Yeah.
92% of all things that are identified in Arnica are fixed before they ever get to production.
Yeah.
That's the sweet spot. It's like, we're not inhibiting. We're identifying, like, this is the exact place in which a developer is most likely to fix the problem. And then the code review becomes clean and goes to production. So that's it's about knowing like the internals of Git and knowing when to pull those webhooks and know when the read the diffs and know when things are going and know when to serve those alerts.
I really like the deep dive into the pipeline, the developer workflow. How do developers actually think they work? Because this is what I'm interested in when it comes to governance. But I still wanted to understand a little bit more. What's the diff between app security, AI security, and AI security? I think there's a lot of misconceptions that occur there. So I asked Anna what the separation is as she sees it.
What do you do with an API? You build an application, or you build an interface, or you build something for someone to use or solve a problem. It's the same thing. You're doing the same things, right? So I think it's just different tools or different outlets, but the same sort of fundamental principles still apply.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes organizations are bigger and have, more complex needs, or whatever it is, they're more stratosphere. I don't know, but there's different appetite for different types of groups. I see what that means, but I do absolutely see so many commonalities, and that was what was so easy to transition sort of my experience to AppSec. Is like, oh, I saw all this stuff with APIs, every single thing, center of excellence, governance, like all these questions, rule sets, developer experience, all of the same questions apply. It's just a different set of tools and a different outcome. So yeah, I see so many commonalities, and I see so much synergy between, the problems that we're solving, and there's space for everybody. I think there's space for everybody. I think who knows about what the dollar amount will be? Who knows what greed will lead for all of us? Who knows how many jobs will be cut because somebody decided AI was more important than any other version of whatever these tools are? That's not for me to decide. What for me to decide is to say, like, I'm solving problems and I'm trying to make sure everybody knows, like, this is how we're solving them.
I trust Anna's view of the space and what's going on. She definitely has the experience and has convinced me. But I wanted to learn from her, how do other people see it? People who are in different roles or maybe different geographic regions, US versus EU, and understand how they see AppSec.
Absolutely. And we have seen that. We've had a lot of, European people reach out to us and ask us for help.
Yeah.
One thing that's really interesting is not just engineering teams use Arnica. We'll have like legal and compliance teams using Arnica too. And it is because, they want to ensure that these organizations are compliant. For instance, software composition analysis, one of the main components of that is determining whether you're using licensing correctly for software, right? So a legal team might be really, really interested in that. So they might want to see reports of, what is being out of compliance, what is out of scope for them. So yeah, I mean, that's crazy that a legal team might log into an AppSec tool, or not even log in, just get a report from this AppSec tool and find value in it.
I think it's really important that we make our security, governance, other things accessible to people who are outside of engineering. That's definitely a big theme here on the Capabilities podcast. How do we make it our tooling more accessible? And part of this, I think, is making these things exist outside of just the pipeline, just that ops or developer view. And so I asked Anna, what's the role of getting outside of the pipeline when it comes to this?
And so, okay, great. You've done that, right? Now you've got your coverage. You still need a person to review that code. You still need something to touch that code to make sure that it is ready to go to production. So now you've created this huge amount of code review, and still only a few, maybe 1, 2, 3 code reviewers to actually touch all of those pieces.
Yeah.
And that's another challenge that we're trying to tackle, right? That's the next piece, because the developer workflow, hey, we've gotten there. We've pretty much tackled that, and it's really efficient. We still need to focus on those people whose job it is to make sure that they're not necessarily the gatekeepers, but they're definitely the people you turn to make sure that code is quality and it's ready. And they're not only concerned with security, they're concerned with bugs, they're concerned with every element of good quality code, right? So that is absolutely something we're thinking about, is how to make their jobs as efficient, effective, and governed as the AppSec teams whose job it is to really focus on security.
Making sure things are effective and having an impact on a developer workflow is definitely key. And part of this, I think, is understanding how things are evolving or changing or not changing. And so I asked her, what's changed when it comes to the developer workflow?
From my experience, it is that a vendor will try to tell you that it is the case because they want to sell you something. And that something is, this is a brand new thing that's so exciting and shiny and new, and your developers will love it, right? That's what the case is. But in reality, it's what it's always been, which is individuals like to work individually in the way that they appreciate working.
Yeah.
And so the more that a place, an enterprise, an organization can support that work in a flexible and sustainable way, the more efficient and effective that work will be. And governing that is always going to be the problem. So the governance question comes back again and again. Doesn't matter where I'm at, doesn't matter what tool it is, it's always the question of governance. So supporting that developer workflow in a flexible and sustainable way, governance is always the number one question.
Definitely reflects what I've learned doing governance across enterprises. But one thing I learned is you've got to adapt it to different teams in different domains. So I wanted to learn more about how she's adapting it to different groups, different teams, and how they work.
How many different repositories do they have? Which
Yeah.
ones are actually in use? Who's using their their personal Gmail account on GitHub to log in to their source code repository, right? Like, there's all kinds of mapping that needs to happen to ensure that we have a full picture and 100% coverage of that entire enterprise.
Because I'm sure there's a lot of trust that goes with those Slack messages, right? That you're not just DDoSing and it's not
Right.
useless, or it's
Right.
got to be contextually relevant.
Absolutely.
And does a developer have to be aware and trigger this, or is this, ideally scanning and seeing and finding the right context and then helping nudge them and guide them? And
Yeah, for the most part, a developer has no idea that anything's even happening. They only become aware of a problem when a problem exists. So there's no false positives, right? Or there's fewer false positives because they don't have to wait for a scan in a CI/CD pipeline. It just happens in the background. I mean, it's a lot of serving the right thing at the right time to the right person. That's the magic sauce, I think. But also, it's very much dependent on your governance team, your AppSec team's policies, right? Because you might have a lower appetite for threat or risk, so you might be a little bit more likely to, let's say, alert on lower, lower risk items that other teams might not care about so much.
Yeah.
So it's very much about, like, what appetite do you have for risk, and how do you set up your policies to make sure that those get addressed before anything happens. And we've seen that in, like, health tech and fintech and some of those more regulated industries where they have to adhere to higher standards than maybe a company that's trying to move a little bit faster and is less concerned with, some outdated, open source package that has a lower score in terms of what we've identified as a threat.
Definitely a lot of nuance when it comes to what is a threat, but I wanted to understand from Anna, like, how is she helping guide developers when it comes to these threats, so that we don't expect them to have to understand all that nuance and details, and we can actually guide them and nudge them in the right direction.
I think a style guide can be impactful and matter. It's the enforcement part of it that's always been the question and the problem.
Or the guidance, the guiding of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, how do you actually make this thing work and apply? Right? It's still a human reading it and doing it.
Yeah.
But if there's an added level of automation and an added level of help to inject it at a point where it can actually be utilized, maybe you can actually start seeing some results and value from those style guides that you're creating. So we've reached that next level of application, and
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see it actually taking shape.
Definitely interested in working with Anna and Arnica to keep defining this layer of how governance can be layered on in these different layers to provide these guardrails for teams. But I also want to explore with them, what does that look like from the wider enterprise practices based upon different domains, teams, and enterprises just doing things entirely differently. How does she adapt to governance and security to that?
Yep, and something we're developing for our customers is what we are calling sort of like tribal knowledge. And it is that name's subject to change because of a variety of reasons, but it's basically sort of taking the context that your teams provide and training your, let's say, AI, SaaS, static application software testing, whatever scanner you might be using, training that on your internal team's knowledge. So, for instance, you might have a team that says, oh, we always dismiss these risks because they don't matter, or because, we've identified this as not a risk, but the tools we use always identify it as risk, but it isn't, right? And so it takes that intrinsic knowledge and it applies it going forward to the algorithm to say, oh, maybe because in an other company it might be a high risk, in this company this team has identified as lower risk for whatever reason. And then the AppSec practitioner, the person who's like moderating the tool itself, would be able to look at all those suggestions, right, that tribal knowledge, and apply what they think is appropriate. Mm-hmm. So it's basically like when you have a movie screening and somebody says, "Oh, I didn't like this ending," or you have you have a feedback card, right? And so you have the team telling you instead of just an AI determining it. It's actual person to person knowledge, which I think is really interesting, a way to train the LLM from the team's actual experience. So I think that's cool that we're actually sort of going into that realm.
And I think that the tribal knowledge, those I think we say domains as a very clean way of separating these boundaries, but I think tribal knowledge and how different teams work is super critical to this, and the different tooling that they use, the different experiences that they have, the different parts of business. There's a lot that goes into that, and one of the things that really caught my attention in the way Anna and Arnica is working is their usage of rules.md and other artifacts at the source level to help achieve a certain level of coverage when it comes to these different tribes, domains, and teams. And so I asked her what the role of that specific file is in helping govern and set the rules and guide teams when it comes to these differences.
And at the source code level. Because that's where we're going to have the most coverage. We're going to have it. Maybe, an enterprise might use GitHub and GitLab, or they might use Bitbucket and GitLab. Right. Whatever that mixture is smaller mixture. Yeah. And everyone's using source code.
Yeah.
It is the source of truth. So if you can inject your code your code rules at that point, you have the most coverage.
That is the intersection I'm really exploring right now when it comes to rules and governance, but shift left to enforcement in the pipeline to rules.md and other guardrails as part of the source control. So I really think this is definitely the future of work governance, which includes security and compliance and privacy and all these other aspects where things are going. And so I'll be keeping exploring here. I'll have Anna back. We're going to partner on some more conversations and see what we can't make happen. But anyways, that was today's episode. Appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you learned something. I learned a lot talking to Anna, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks. One more thing before you go. I hold these kind of conversations like I had with Anna every Tuesday at 10 a.m. for my European and East Coast U.S. audience, as well as Thursday at 1 p.m. for my West Coast U.S. and Midwest and East Coast audience. So if you want to come by, have a conversation about a specific topic, these are the times I'm steering most of these conversations to. And then we chop them up and use them as part of these podcasts for different topics and different themes. of conversations that we're having. So feel free to come by if you want to talk. Happy to bring you in as part of the panel and the discussion, or you're welcome to join just as a listener. They're live webinars Tuesdays 10 a.m. Eastern, Thursdays 1 p.m. Eastern, and look forward to having you there. Thanks for tuning in.